Thank you, everybody, for coming to this lecture. It's the fourth lecture in the series by PRE, the Collective for Reimagining Engineering and Innovation. Today, we have Professor Sujatha Srinivasan. She is teaching in her alma mater, IIT Madras, and has had a stint in the prosthetic industry and subsequently did her PhD. And she has been working in the area of prosthetics and orthotics, biomechanics, and mechanism. She heads the TTK Center for Rehabilitation Research and device development, focusing on developing assistive and rehabilitation devices biomechanically, economically suited to Indian lifestyle and conditions. The group has gone on to commercialize several devices, including a rise standing wheelchair and NeoFly NeoBolt devices for seamless indoor-outdoor mobility. They have a lot of patents, and she's going to tell us how to go from idea to product and where theory and practice meet together. Thank you, Sujatha. It's all yours.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to group for this opportunity, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. So I thought I would talk about our journey, sitting here in academia, going from idea to prototype to product, and sort of discuss some of the opportunities and pitfalls we have encountered. We work in the area of developing assistive devices for people with locomotor impairments, movement impairments. And, I just called it purposeful engineering, the journey from idea to prototype to product. So what do I mean by purposeful engineering? So recently, one of my former students visited, and he had a very nice way of putting it. He said, science is about how the universe works, and engineering is about making it work for you. I thought it was a very nice way of describing engineering. So this was Girish, who came recently. And he said he wished he had realized this earlier during his BTech. He said he kind of understood this only in his final year. And by the time he had already kind of made up his mind on what his career path should be, but he wished that he had understood this earlier. So when I say purposeful engineering, see, all of engineering has a purpose. I think that we all know. What I really mean here is, what varies is the extent of involvement of the engineer in the end goal. Like, can you see the benefit of what you do directly on the end user? So that's what I mean by purposeful engineering, because in my own experience, I wanted to work in an area where I could see the impact on the end user, an area that could have a direct impact. I mean, I could be, engineers work in large power plants, for example, or oil rigs, but you don't directly interact with the end user. And I wanted to work in an area where I could see the direct impact of what I do. And so my personal journey actually started over 30 years ago. I got interested in this area of prosthetics, orthotics, and assistive devices when I was a BTech student at IIT Madras, and I was hunting for a topic for my BTech project. And I managed to find one with CMC Vellore. I went on to finish my BTech, went on to a master's at the University of Toledo, where I again worked in prosthetics, then worked in industry, at a prosthetics industry for about close to 8 years, took a break to be a full-time mother, and then finally decided that maybe I should switch careers to academia. And so I did a PhD with the biomechanics specialization working on human walking at The Ohio State University. And after that, since 2008, I've been a faculty in mechanical engineering at IIT Madras. So the area that I work in, when I talk about assistive devices or assistive technology, everything from your eyeglasses to hearing aids, wheelchairs, mobility aids like walkers or crutches, other cognitive aids, all these fall under the ambit of assistive technology. And if you look at the numbers of, the number of people who need assistive technology, it's more than 1 billion, and the numbers just growing because of our lifestyles, increased life expectancy, aging, etc. But what is sad is that out of these people who need assistive technology, less than 10% have access to appropriate products that will help them lead more fulfilling, more independent lives. And so when I came back from India, I found that things had not changed much in the assistive device landscape in the 15 years that I had been away. And so I thought this would be an area that I could contribute to now. Sitting in academia with my students, I could work in this area. And so we work on using biomechanics, mechanical design, and analysis to design devices for people with movement disability, both rehabilitation as well as assistive devices. So if you look at the spectrum, so in my initial part of the talk, I will talk about our journey in this area, and then I will talk about some of the learnings that can be extended to other areas as well. So in the initial, if you look at the spectrum of assistive devices, on one extreme, and this is usually what is available in countries like India, you have very simple, low-cost devices, but which are not very functional. So these are maybe too simple to be useful, and the rejection rate is pretty high. At the other end of the spectrum, you have very high-tech devices, but many of them have not moved from the lab to the market. So their impact is pretty minimal. And they're also, the ones that are available are also extremely expensive and out of reach for most people who need them. So we work somewhere in the middle. We want to develop more functional, high quality, and affordable devices using an interdisciplinary approach for this area so that more people have access to the right kind of devices. So this is broadly the development framework that we follow. We identify needs either through direct interaction with users or from the literature, come up with design requirements which lead to design objectives. Then you have the process, iterative process of conceptual design, analysis, simulations, prototyping is something that we do. And then perhaps once the prototype is at a more mature stage, we try to put it through some rigorous mechanical testing to ensure quality, because our goal always is to, and then of course user trials, and this is an iterative process. And our outcomes are not just patents and publications, even though in academia, that is sort of what we are trained to do, but we try to at least come up to the stage of a pre-commercial prototype that can be then tested to standards, and we try to ensure that the journey is complete with commercialization through an industry partner. So the collaboration model that we have kind of evolved, we have learned over the years and evolved, is what I call the grid model. So the 4 pillars of the model are grant, research, industry, and dissemination. And the grant, for our work, it's mainly through the government. CSR, corporate social responsibility funding, is also a major source for our funding. Foundations, because our work is something that has social impact. So we find it, we find that these are organizations that are willing to fund our work. The research would be a nodal academic or research institution like IIT Madras. And we could do this in partnership with other academic institutions where there is a scientific rigor involved and there is a focus on the function, not just the bottom line, because industries have their constraints. So they have, they are more focused on very time-bound kind of development. Of course, our grants are time-bound, so we do have to do that. But it's a little bit, our focus is primarily on achieving the functionality. We try to work with an industry partner as early as possible. It could be either a partner with established manufacturing capabilities, or it could be startups. So we have startups from that have spun off from R2D2 or in the process or are in the process of spinning off. We have one that is out there successfully independent now. And that is in order to provide the channel to the market, because our goal is always to go from the idea to prototype to product for the maximum impact. Because especially in an area like assistive technology, you are not going to make an impact if your design stays in the lab. And the final, last but not the least pillar of this grid model is the dissemination aspect. Right from the start, user-centric design forms a large part of what we do. They also become partners. We also have partners to reach out, like the NGOs, who connect us to the end users, because we need to do extensive user trials. And they also eventually help in market penetration. They become, help us with the awareness creation later, once the product is out in the market. So these are the four pillars of the grid collaboration model that we've been able to use successfully for this development. So I'll just take you through a couple of case studies, if you will. So one of the things we first started off was a standing wheelchair. So the first question is, why the need for a standing wheelchair? So even if you don't have a disability, we now lead very sedentary lifestyles, and we are advised to get up and walk, stand for some time, because standing is an essential part of our being as human beings. It helps with a lot of health-related issues. We need it for improved circulation. We need it for good bone health, range of motion about the joints. All these are very essential. And if you are in a seated position, a wheelchair user, because of their inability to stand, spends hours sitting in a wheelchair, and it can lead to secondary complications like contractures, pressure sores, which can be life-threatening. And so standing as therapy is very essential for a wheelchair user, but it's a very difficult task for them to perform because somebody has to, they may have to wear orthosis. A couple of people have to lift them up, put them in some kind of a frame, stabilize their trunk and their knees, etc., to enable them to stand. So integrating a standing mechanism into a wheelchair can have multiple benefits. And that idea by itself is not new. It's been done. But existing products, mainly which are imported or which are motorized, are very expensive and out of reach for most users, even in Western countries. Because these are typically... I think somebody needs to mute. So these are typically not covered by insurance. but they have a lot of benefits. So RESNA, the Rehabilitation Engineering Society of North America, has a white paper where they talk about all the benefits of standing, how it reduces the risk of urinary tract infections, pressure sores, spasticity, etc. So we knew that, and if you look at a manual standing wheelchair, when I first looked at it, I thought this is essentially a mechanism. And so the project was first given to my students in a second year kinematics and dynamics of machinery course. I gave it as a course project. I just asked them to design a mechanism that would move a chair from the sitting to the standing position, just the kinematic mechanism. And then we had one student who took it up as his final year project, and he did more work on it, did a lot of the analysis, used spring balancing, because it takes a lot of effort to lift your body to the standing position using just enough arm strength. And so he built the first prototype. This is one of the later prototypes, but you can see here that it functions like a regular wheelchair. This is a person with an actual spinal cord injury, and I don't know what this is here. So this is a person with a spinal cord injury who is using this, and you can see that he is able to operate it with minimal arm effort. It doesn't look like he's huffing and puffing to lift himself up. And this is a purely mechanical device. So there's a lot of engineering that has gone into, and these are some of the graphs that I'm just showing by way of showing that there's a lot of analysis that has gone behind achieving this. And also, achieving customizability, because not every user weighs the same or is the same height. So we have to build in customizability into this design so that we can still reap the benefits of mass manufacturing when it became a product. So we started off, this was one of the intermediate prototypes, but you can see here that from the proof of concept, actually there was a version 0, which is what the first student built, and it was a prototype that only he dared to stand on. So slowly we started adding more, making it more robust. Once we had the proof of concept, we created, then we created a version that people with disability could actually use, which needed a lot of safety features to be incorporated into the device. That was version 1, which you saw in the video also. And so slowly we started ticking these boxes. What were the issues that we had to address? Standing, customizability, outdoor mobility, reducing the complexity, because if you see, version 1 still looks like a machine. But slowly you can see that it's starting to look simplified, more sleek. The form changed. We went from a 4-wheel to a 3-wheel design for better propulsion, outdoors, etc. So slowly we started, we achieved, and each one we did a number of user trials with each version in order to address the issues in the design. So this was the design journey. What started off as an idea and was given as a mechanism design project in a class. This was the first prototype. This is the student who built the first prototype, Harshal. And then over the years, from 2015, when we got the funding from Wellcome, that's when we were able to really make progress and achieve the final commercial version. So here is the grid model, the partners in the grid model that you can see here. And the standing wheelchair was launched in 2019. So how does the grid model, help us? So, with the grants, right? I was able to have some of the students who worked on the project who were interested in making this journey from prototype to product. I was able to have them on as project staff. I've had other projects where people, after they finish their PhD, have stayed back as postdoctoral fellows in order to realize the work that they did during their PhD as products. So it gives them the time and the resources to explore the entrepreneurial journey. Especially for startups, capital investment for hardware startups can be very, very formidable. And these kinds of grants enable us to provide that level of support to the startups. It also provides students who want to, who are interested, who want to explore this option, a balance between the familial pressures to actually have at least a job that will pay, probably not a high paying job, but at least strike a balance between, familial pressures to have a job and the desire to sort of try something, follow their passion. And it gives them this experience in working towards time-bound outcomes. Because a grant is for a specific period of time. We have deliverables that we have to meet, etc. So it gives them some experience in project management as well. So the research institution, what does that bring in to this model? We have the credibility for access to the grants. That's a big thing. Private industry may not be able to access these grants as easily, or even startups. To the magnitude of the grants, we are able to access that because of the credibility that we have as an academic institution. We are doing this with scientific rigor. So we have the resources available. We have collaborations within and outside the institute that we can leverage to bring this scientific rigor to the development process. And students can get a mix of theoretical and practical experience. Because of the rigor, there's, they have to do some of this analysis, and they also get the opportunity to have some practical experience. And many of my students, when they have stayed back, they've been part of patents that have come out of the work that we have done. They've had opportunities to publish, all of which help them in their future careers. The research institution also acts as a grant multiplier because, they get the time of the faculty free of charge. We are doing it as part of our jobs. They get time of the students, the facilities, the infrastructure. So the research institution actually multiplies the grant that the funding agency is providing by several times. And the students get to work with diverse teams because they're doing different aspects of the project, not just one small part. And of course, they get project management experience, and the institute helps take care of the IP filing, licensing. So we have all this added support because of the research institution. The industry partner would be the channel to market, because sitting in an academic institution, I cannot sell stuff. I cannot make and sell stuff. So we need a channel to the market, and that's where the industry partner comes in. And it also helps us, we start thinking about manufacturability from an early stage. It's not an afterthought, which usually happens, when we think that we can design that, come up with the technology and then hand it over to someone. There's this pressure to simplify, and simplify the design, because you want to make it manufacturable, easy to assemble, use standard parts and processes. So all this really helps because this is something that I tell my students a lot. A simple design is harder to come up with. You can, usually the first designs they come up with are so complex, and the challenge is in retaining the functionality but simplifying the design. So that is something that I tend to stress with them. And it also helps when there's an industry involved, because they'll say this can't be done, this is too complex, and it also improves, for the students. They now have to communicate with someone outside the academic setting. They have to document things properly. So these are experiences that they learn. And for a startup, if they're doing a startup, they start thinking about various business aspects. How are we going to sustain? How are we going to create the market? How are we going to do the marketing and sales and supply chain and costing? And if we have the product out there, how are we going to service it? All these questions they start thinking about when we are working with an industry partner. And dissemination is a very important component, because it's the immersion and the interaction with the users that will help you develop a user-centric product, that will help you get a clear understanding of the needs and design something that a user wants and is willing to pay for. So that, it helps to avoid this ivory tower syndrome, right? We tend to, as engineers and technologists, we tend to develop the technology and then try to push it on users. And that's generally not going to work. The need has to come. You should be fulfilling real needs for your product to be successful. After the product also, they help in the awareness creation. Dissemination in terms of training is also a very important aspect, because in the assistive devices area especially, the concept of one size fits all is pervasive. And as we all know, it's a very wrong thing, because if all of us had the same power eyeglasses, for instance, most of us would not be functional. So it makes no sense, but that's how the industry has been operating. And therefore, the need for training, the awareness creation, and also attention to aesthetics and usability is very important. And that comes with the immersion and the interaction with the users. And it's not just the end users. You have to engage with the other stakeholders who will connect you to the, you have to make doctors aware of the benefits of assistive devices. Other healthcare professionals, train them how to assess for and fit a particular assistive device. Caregivers, how do you help train them? So there are, others in the chain, other stakeholders that you have to engage with and interact with in order to achieve a product for the end user. So I will now talk about the second one, where we spun off a startup. So it was during the trials for the standing wheelchair that we actually realized this need. So when we were doing the field visits, we found a lot of people had these one size fits all wheelchairs, which many of them were not even able to use because they lived in areas where the terrain was very bad, and this was not a good wheelchair for them to use. And if they had to go outdoors, they would have to transfer to another device. And the very process of transferring is a very unsafe process. And so many of them would end up really not going out. And that was what sparked the idea for NeoFly and NeoGold, our active wheelchair and the add-on that converts it into an outdoor vehicle without the need to transfer. So for seamless indoor-outdoor mobility, and I'll just play a video that will illustrate what this device does. Are you able to hear the audio?
मेरा 2011 में दोस्त के कंधे पर से गिरने के कारण मेरा शरीर पैरालिसिस हो गया था। इस व्हीलचेयर प्रयोग करने के बाद आसानी से हम कहीं भी जा सकते हैं, आ सकते हैं। हम लगभग एक साल से काम कर रहे हैं इस प्रोजेक्ट पे।
It's the best India designed wheelchair that I've sat on in 27 years.
पहले हम व्हीलचेयर से हम जो मैराथन करते थे उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा समय लगता था। इस व्हीलचेयर के प्रयोग करने के बाद टाइमिंग है वो बहुत कम हो गया। एक गाड़ी आती है जो कि इस व्हीलचेयर में आसानी से हम सेट कर सकते हैं और गाड़ी सेट करने के बाद हम आसानी से बाहर जा सकते हैं, कम स्पेस में जा सकते हैं और कहीं भी पार्किंग कर सकते हैं और गाँव में चला सकते हैं। अगर गड्ढे ऊंचे नीचे हैं तो आसानी से चला सकते हैं। अभी हमको कोई डर नहीं है, हम कहीं भी जा सकते हैं।
See, I have a car that I drive. It's hand operated. But often the challenges that I face in terms of mobility is somebody to get your wheelchair, somebody kind of load it, or even going to my parents' place.
Hello? Looks like we are frozen.
A sign of freedom and liberation. To go to the grocery shop or to the supermarket. Now my wife is going to kick my backside and I have no excuses, absolutely.
So just to point out, we strongly recommend the use of a helmet. This video was shot in a controlled setting. And I had that text put in there, but I don't know what happened. Maybe I missed using the right version of the video. So I just want to make that clear that we do recommend, we insist that a user use helmets while using this device. So this is New Motion is a startup. They've been now in business for about 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years now. They're on their own. We are no longer, they're able to sustain on their own. So that's the product, NeoFly and NeoHold. So I just wanted to share some, learnings and limitations of the grid model. Since this is essentially academia driven, of course, most of us need to balance doing these sort of projects with other academic commitments. It is, something's got to give. So it's a challenge to figure out, whether you really want to do this and how much time you're willing to devote to this kind of product development journey. And of course, because you're working in an academic setting, it's also subject to the bureaucracy that you have in an academic setting. How you, the flexibility with which you can spend the funds, and, there are all kinds of rules you have to follow, all of which adds time to the development cycle. So, and for PhDs, PhDs could be a great source for product development because they are here for 5 years. But it's very difficult to sell product development to doctoral committees. So, even though there is a good bit of analysis and all that goes on here, if the end product especially looks simple, it doesn't have the value that it should actually have for a PhD. So it's a difficult sell, and therefore it becomes a challenge to do product development with PhD students. So I tend to have them do more theoretical work and have product development even based on their work, either after they have graduated or, in others may be doing it parallelly with them for the product development. And not all types of translational research can attract funding. I'm lucky to be working in an area where the social impact is very visible. And therefore, we have been somewhat fortunate in attracting funding. But even here, in very early stage research, it was not so easy, because who will fund the first prototype? Now we have a center, we have some base funds which can do this, because most funders want to see something before they are willing to fund the next stage. And of course, it's again subject to the whims of the funding bodies. Some funders are more deliverable focused. Some of them are more spending focused. They care more about how many. You said you would hire 5 people. If you need 6 people, you're out of luck. Even if you are within the budget. So it can become difficult to do this kind of work sometimes. It's very necessary that you have like-minded industry partners as well as dissemination partners. Industry partner must be aligned with the area. They must understand the space that you are working in, so that they appreciate the challenges in that space. Whether the business is, whether the industry is a business-to-business industry or a business-to-customer industry, how they currently market their products, how they service them, all these kind of matter. And I think we've had more challenges because assistive devices is it's a very fragmented market, it's a very specialized market. Maybe other markets may not have this kind of a challenge. And industry also, because the grants usually take care of the funding, some amount of funding for the industry as well. Their commitment may not be the same as when they are putting in their own money. So that is another challenge that we have had to deal with. Startups, they have better ethos because they are in it they have a better sense of ownership. But they come with their set of problems because they have heavy capital expenditure costs, especially for hardware startups. And so, you have to find a way to account for those in the early stages, find a way to help them out. And they have to learn all aspects of the business and quickly for them to be able to sustain and cross the valley of death, so to speak. Bringing in investors too early in the game may change the direction of the business, may change, what you set out to do, the kind of impact you wanted to have. And so, but these are things that need to be thought about early on, because you need to have sustainability of the business. So for this talk, I thought I would get some feedback from some of the alumni from R2D2 who have worked on, these type of projects. Maybe not all of them saw something go from idea to product. Some of them saw it at least go from idea to prototype. And so they had to do some hands-on work or work with others to do this. And I just asked them about how what they are doing now and how this experience influenced their idea about engineering. And some of the feedback I got was very interesting. So they said that the early core courses, if they don't, the relevance to real life, if in those early core courses, they're not shown the relevance to real life, then their decision to pursue non-core or non-core, it happens very early. So they decide then and there that, okay, this is not something I want to do. So we have to catch them young, we have to catch them in those early years in those core courses and really show them what engineering can do, what kind of purpose it serves in their everyday life. And they said that labs are not necessarily the, they don't really associate that with actual hands-on work because they feel it's more like following a cookbook for experiments. And so many of them were not very kind about the lab courses that we offer. What they all said in one way or the other was that, when they get open-ended projects, whether it's in a course or whether it's part of a final year project or as part of a PhD or anything, in whatever course they are in, if the goals are well defined, if the needs are well known, and there's a hands-on component, then it's more likely to kindle interest in engineering, because they said it develops troubleshooting and problem solving skills, because things, when you're building something, things seldom go as they are intended. What you can do on the computer need not translate to a physical part, like even manufacturing processes, right? You don't have any constraints when you're making a part on the computer, but it's a different story when you go to actually make that part. And it gives them a good feeling of converting the knowledge to action. And a chance to experience reality. So even in that second year kinematics course, when they actually make a mechanism, it could be from wood, it could be from cardboard. You have a 2D kinematic diagram, but when you actually start making it, you realize that it cannot really be 2D. These things have to be spaced out in parallel planes for them to even move, for the links to move. So even simple things like that, experiencing that, they felt was more likely to kindle interest. And I also give them a project. So in the kinematics course, one of their projects that I give them, I call it Mech Mania. So as soon as I teach them something about mobility and mechanisms, I tell them to go out and find as many mechanisms in their on campus, in their hostels, wherever, and document those. Find as many mechanisms as possible, draw their kinematic diagram, find their mobility, etc. So that gives them a feel for, okay, this is not something that I'm just going to be studying about. It's something that I'm actually using all the time. And it also, some of them said that, in theory, we make a lot of assumptions. When you do hands-on work, for instance, in mechanisms, you say that the links are rigid bodies. When you try to make it out of cardboard and things are bending, the mechanisms don't work the same way. So this brings out the gaps and it helps them appreciate the engineering. So they also said that, learning others, it helped, like project management, if we could incorporate those skills as well in the engineering curriculum, they would benefit more from that. And some of them said that, again, the tangible, the thing that got me hooked to engineering was, seeing tangible results that you can physically experience. And it's not just, your project is not just a bunch of folders on your computer, but something that you can see and feel. So that was something that somebody mentioned. And unlike in exams, knowns and unknowns are not very clear. And so doing generates a better understanding. They also wanted the freedom to try out ideas and the freedom to fail. And that, they said, can help them, develop more of an interest in engineering. And they felt that an experiential learning lasts longer and deeper. So one of my students, he is now a very successful engineering consultant, design engineer. He's done very well for himself. He said that, he doesn't remember a lot from his theory classes, but the work, he was part of the development of the standing wheelchair as well as the NeoMotion, the products of NeoMotion. So he felt that his learning from those have lasted a lot longer and it's a deeper learning. But despite all this, they also told me why many students still don't go for core engineering jobs. And the two main reasons were, one was the economics of it. They felt that not having high paying jobs can be very discouraging. And the other main reason was they felt that there was a lack of interesting jobs. And most of them ended up doing less engineering, more management, even when they went for seemingly core engineering jobs. And they found that, if you need more autonomy, you want to pursue more interesting R&D, those generally tend to require a PhD. And so that was another reason some of them, felt that it's a harder journey to go for a core engineering job where you can do something that you really like. And that said, not all students, even when they are really good analytically, not all of them would have an aptitude for prototyping or product development. And that was another interesting feedback that I got. So this is, this is just a slide that captures many of the prototypes and products that my students have built over the years in various areas of to tackle movement impairments. And now we also have a clinical team. So to enhance the interdisciplinary aspect of the work, we have a clinical team. We are also doing more of the awareness programs. We are going to set up an experience zone, National Center for Assistive Health Technology in the research park. We have peer trainers training others to use wheelchairs effectively, etc. So just want to acknowledge all the support that we have received from our collaborators and funders and dissemination partners and industries. And thank you. I'm happy to take any, I don't know what the time is.
We have about 10 to 13 minutes at least.
Okay.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful talk. And I think this notion of bringing theory and practice is badly needed everywhere. And I wanted to make a remark. Recently, Terence Tao, the Fields medalist, said, theory, mathematical theory is useful to get rid of bad intuition, not necessarily to kill intuition. So if we think of mathematics as a way to think about analysis and other things, a way to think about not doing bad things, but get better intuition about how real world works, I think that came out beautifully in your talk. And also, I think the other point you made is very important, which is that when you have an example connected to the theory, you have an anchor to which the theory belongs. And hence you are able to see the difference between the theory and reality and provide that nice balance between the two. Yeah, and the last point I want to make is freedom to fail. And I think in the Indian society in general, we are punished for failure a lot more than failure as a way to learn. And I think encouraging people to fail. And usually when I hire people, I say, please fail, but come and tell me when you failed. But if you make the same failure, I'll throw you out because you didn't learn, right? It's a way of making them tolerant of failure and being aware that it's a way to learn beyond what they know. With that, I'll open it up for questions, and please, any of you ready to talk, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and go ahead.
Hi, I had a question.
Hi, Frida.
Yeah. Thank you for your inspirational talk, Sujatha. Sorry if I mispronounce your
you
your
can
name.
switch on your video.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. I was wondering, we have large numbers at universities, at technical universities, and this wonderful idea. How do you think, or what are your thoughts about how to scale this? For instance, first in the mechanical school, but also mechanical engineering school, but also maybe across the university to civil engineering or electronic engineering, etc.
Yes. So actually, I would say electronics engineers do very well. I think they do a lot more hands-on stuff during their courses. So I found that electronics engineers are much more willing to, just jump in and start building stuff. And I think the problem with, say, mechanical engineering or civil engineering is you need a lot more infrastructure, you need a lot more resources to enable this kind of prototyping. But yeah, I think, like I said, you need a critical mass of people who are willing to do this kind of thing. Like I always say, there are only 24 hours in a day, right? And so if you do this kind of work, something else is going to take a hit. Like as academics, for instance, I may not have as many publications as some of my other peers because I spend a lot of time doing this kind of work, right? So it's a balance. Some of us may not care as much about it, but if you're early on in your career, those things may matter. And so it's difficult to find that critical mass of people who want to do this kind of work sitting in academia. And also many academics, I think it's very essential that academics have some industry experience. Either maybe academia can encourage them to go spend summers in the industry, or I was lucky that my path to academia was slightly different. It was not the traditional path. So I had worked in industry and then did my PhD. So it was, I had a different perspective when I came in. But, many of my colleagues, they've come straight from, they did a PhD, they did a postdoc, and then they are in academia. So getting them to do things like this may be more challenging. So, academia, you have the freedom, right? So I think if more people start using that freedom to do these sort of things, it could scale up. But we have published on the grid model. I think it's a viable model that can be replicated in academic institutions, because it really addresses that issue of funding. Academic institutions can get, and now I think there is more of a focus on translational research. And so I'm hoping that there will be, we will see more products coming out of universities than we have in the past. Does that answer your question?
It's a sort of a paradoxical system that we are developing more and more knowledge, and our educational programs or curricula are not getting any longer, and all the knowledge is somehow available on the web, and so we don't teach them how to work with knowledge that is readily available beyond the classes. And we want to put anything and everything we know as academics into classes that we teach. And that's sort of a system that we have to see how we get out of that.
Yeah, we need to, the information is all out there, I tell my students, I can't tell you more than what Google can tell you. I cannot match Google. You can get information out there, but I think these kind of open and making them think, teaching them how to think, how to analyze, how to ask questions. I think that's where we need to start playing more of a role as academics. Not so much, unlike in our days where the teacher was the only source of information. Now we are no longer sources of information. Google can do that way better than we can. So, we have to focus on the other aspects.
I think you put a finger on a very important point, which is that given the proliferation of access to good and bad knowledge out there, the only major thing to teach them is the way to apply the knowledge and understand what works and what doesn't work. It's that translation from what they know from Google, then why have universities at all? They all can go to Google and come out, right? There is that translation and connection to society becomes a very important part of the modern educational enterprise, I think.
First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Sujatha for a wonderful talk. It was very informative and very nice to hear this talk. I have a suggestion. why don't institutes like IITs consider, you rightly mentioned that people who are into, who go for PhD, they have to go into more analytical and research oriented stuff so that they can, at the end, they can further their careers with publications and academic kind of these things. At the other end, you have masters and BTech people who do not have the luxury of time or to focus wholeheartedly on building a product. So one suggestion that I would like to give is, why don't IITs consider giving a 2 to 3 years course exclusively for hands-on working on a project or multiple projects, so that students at the end of it come out with something very, very tangible and very concrete. And I'll say this for one more reason. I worked in industry for almost 22 years. Among my colleagues, I found that there were a few people who are extraordinarily intuitive guys. They had a very good feel for engineering, but they were not so good at analysis. They could not write differential equations, and they could not do deep integration and that kind of a thing. I think we are missing out as a society. There is a cream of talent available who are really good engineers, but who are not so well equipped in the mathematics and analytical thing. So why shouldn't we give them a platform with a course which is taking their best, their skills and giving them value for what they are good at? That's my that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. IIT Madras actually has an MS program in entrepreneurship. So it's a program they can work with any department, and they can take forward any idea and develop a business model around it. And hopefully the idea is that they would take it forward as a startup. So we do have an MS program.
What's the duration of the course? What is the duration?
I think it's like 3 years. An MS program is typically 2.5 to 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, nice to know that.
So you do earn a degree. You earn a degree by doing that. I've evaluated theses from other countries where product development seems like a perfectly good way of earning a PhD. Yep. So it doesn't seem, I think we just have to come out of that mindset here, because I have evaluated theses from other places. Where it's, you start off with a need, you do the necessary thing, you come up with concepts, do the analysis, come up with the prototype, do some testing, then, evaluate it and forms a good thesis. And
I think as long as, I see this thesis, as you correctly point out, there are product development thesis. As long as the student is able to articulate why they chose that methodology to arrive at the product they did, then there is a legitimate notion of a thesis, because as we know, design is not the same for every context. Different contexts require different methodological approaches. As long as they are able to articulate that and say, here is how I did it, it has a tangible outcome which is usable by others as well, in a generic sense.
Right. And as long as the need analysis is also done properly.
Exactly.
You don't come up with something just because you had an idea and you thought it was something you should develop. So if they do the need analysis well, then, I think it's absolutely a valid work for a PhD.
And also often, sorry to take one more minute, often what happens when you are doing practical stuff, you come back and say, hey, the theory doesn't work very well here. Let me do something to the theory, see whether I can improve the theory in a particular direction. So there is a feedback between the two. If we don't have it, actually theory doesn't develop very well either. I think that is something we need to pay attention.
And you can even, you can challenge standard notions also. Some products have, for instance, in the prosthetic knee that we developed, an extension assist has been used for decades in prosthetic knees. And we found out from our simulations that, and our analysis, that for certain geometries, an extension assist is unnecessary. And we showed that. And, so even if it was like, it was something that was unexpected, we had observed it in the users, because when the extension assist wasn't working properly, we just took it out and told the person, why don't you try walking? And they seem to be doing fine. So we went back, looked at it again, and we could show through our analysis and our simulations that it was not really necessary, which further simplified the design. And it is something that, we hadn't really given much thought to before, because all the knees that are out there have extension assists. So like you said, yeah, you can come back and, it opens new, provides new insights into the problem.
I'm going to close unless there is any other question urgently somebody wants to ask. Either put on chat or please speak up. Okay, if nobody wants to have any more thoughts or comments, thank you very much, Sujatha, for this really lovely lecture. I think it has opened up so many things and also models of how to do these things. And I think more should be written also in the educational literature about these kind of experiments. And that is something I think we may want to think about in the long run as to how to bring together these experiences as part of CRE in sort of some form of written documents to be distributed to people as well. That would be really
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a good day. Bye.